Howdy folks, and welcome back to yet another Britgrid Intermediate Blender class episode. And today we're going to be looking at rigging, what it is, how you do it, how it works, why it works, and sometimes why it doesn't work, and what to do to fix it. So we'll be talking about a few things. We'll be talking about armatures, which is like a skeleton, and bones. So normally a bone hierarchy is part of the armature. We'll be talking about vertex groups, which are the groups of vertices in the mesh that the bone movement or the armature movement affects. We'll also be talking about parenting, how you can parent a mesh to an armature to get it to work, and we'll also look at to some degree about the bone hierarchy in the armature. So let's get started. What I'm going to do is I'm first going to make a very simple armature. So I'm just going to go to add, I'm going to go armature, and before I do anything else I'm going to go to visibility. No, I'm not. I'm going to go to viewport display on the data, on the object properties in the properties panel. I'm going to turn on the name so that the name is displayed. You can see it says armature, and I'm going to tell it to make sure that the armature is in front of anything else, any other mesh that we've got in the scene. Now you can see that the bone of this armature, thick bit is the root of the bone, and the thin bit is where the bone, and the thin piece is the bit that will kind of move and rotate from the base part. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rotate that. I'm going to hold down Control and just make sure that it's snapped. It's not really important, but that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so now what we can do is, if we go into edit mode, just going to select the end of the bone here. I'm going to extrude it. So I'm going to press E to extrude. I'm going to press X to keep it in the X direction and just pull out the new bone. So it's roughly the same size as the other bone there. Okay, so let's go back. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into pose mode, and I just need to make sure that that we're in the viewport display. I'm going to do something? What am I going to do? I'm going to make sure that we've got the bone name enabled, which I kind of think we have. Visibility, it's saying should be a name there, but I'm not seeing a name on that at the moment. I'm just seeing the name armature. Okay, let's go into edit mode. Have a look what we've got going on here. Viewport display. Here we go. I'm going to turn on the name for the actual bones, so we can see we've got an armature that's made up of two bones. And if I go back into pose mode is what you use to move the armature and move the bones. Now if I rotate this kind of root bone, press R, you'll see that the bone 01 is rotating with it, and that's because if we go back to object mode or maybe edit mode, I think edit mode would be better. We select this bone 01 and we go to the So I'm going to go to the bone properties and just undo the relations, pop down the relations panel, and you can see that for bone 01, which is the bone we've got selected, you can see in its properties panel here, the bone is connected, it inherits a rotation, and its parent is called bone. And if we killed that relationship, so if I undid that parenting, so if I just get rid of that, if I select this other bone now and rotate it, you can see that it's not really working very well. Let's do it in pose mode. So let's rotate that. You can see that it's broken the relationship, so that the bone 01 isn't moving now. So let's go back to edit mode. We'll recreate that relationship on this one here. So we'll make the parent for bone 01 this bone here. So let's go back into pose mode, which is what we use to move our bones, our armatures. And we'll do rotate, and now you can see it's working as you'd expect it to work. Okay, that's great. Now what we want to do is we want to create some mesh, some simple mesh to attach to this armature. So I'm going to go to object mode, deselect everything, just going to add in a cube, scale it down, kind of like that. Then I'm going to scale it on the X direction, just so that we've got something that is roughly the right size for that bone there. And I'm just going to duplicate that, Shift D, and I'll move that one over there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the armature, go into edit mode. I'm just going to adjust the position of the start points of the bones, really. I guess we're going to have to put these in the middle somewhere, something like that. Great. So now we've got our separate mesh objects. So we've got one that's called cube 01 that's next to bone 01, and we've got one called cube that is next to just the bone. Now what we need to do is we need to parent the mesh. So we need to parent this mesh to the armature. So I'm selecting the mesh, and then I'm shift clicking on the armature so that the armature is the active object. I'm then going to say object parent, and I'm going to say parent it to the armature, and we're going to let the armature deform the mesh. Right, so we've done that. Now let's see what that's done to our let's see how that's affected the mesh. If we go to the modifiers, you can see that it's actually added in modifier to each of our meshes. That's an armature modifier, so it's added in the armature modifier, and that's been applied to both those mesh objects. Now if I went into pose mode, if I select the armature, now if I rotate that, just go to side view, if I rotate that, you can see the mesh isn't moving, and that's because even though it's been parented to the armature or the mesh needs a few more things doing to it before it's going to work nicely for us. So what it needs is actually the mesh. Let me go into object mode. So the mesh needs some, let's go into edit mode. We need to add in to the mesh a vertex group. And a vertex group is just a selection of vertices within the mesh. So what I'm going to do is I've selected this mesh here. I'm going to press on the plus. Excuse me. I'm going to rename that to bone 001. So that group of vertices I'm going to assign. Clicked on the assign button. So if I deselect them now, click on the deselect button, and I can click on the select button, and you can see that that group of vertices has been made for that piece of mesh. And we're basically going to do the same thing for this other mesh. I'm going to click on new vertex group. I'll rename it. It doesn't, and the name doesn't matter, but I'll rename it to the bone that's underneath it. So I'm just going to call it bone. Let's go into edit mode. We're going to assign those vertices and then just deselect them and reselect them. Oh, sorry, select. Just to make sure that those vertices have been assigned. So they have. So now what we need to do is we need to do what's called weight painting. Now weight painting assigns a weight, a value, usually between 0 and 1, to each of these vertices in the vertex group that we've just made, that allows the bone to then control how that mesh moves, how those vertices are affected by the movement of the bone underneath it. So in order to do that, what we do is we're in object mode. I'm going to select the armature first, then I'm going to select the mesh object, and then I'm going to go up to my menu and go to weight paint. Okie dokie, so we've got weight paint. Now you can see that we have got it's got a red colour, which in theory means that and if I control and left click, I can select a bone. So it's showing me that bone 01 has got some influence over the mesh underneath it, kind of purple colour. The colouring means that that bone is affecting, it's got kind of about 50% control over the vertices of the mesh. So anyway, let's do some weight painting. So I'm in draw mode, I've got my weight up to set to 1, the radius is a bit small, so I'm just going to whack that right up, and I'm going to click on this, on the vertices of the mesh, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make sure that all the bits of that mesh gone red, and that actually shows me that that bone that's selected, bone 01, has now got 100% effect on all the vertices in that group. So we can also do the same for, go back to object mode, so select the armature, shift select the mesh, and then we'll go to weight paint again. So we're going to do the same thing for this other bone. First of all, we need to select that bone, we need to deselect the other bone, so you just click on it a few times. So you can see that that bone, the bone that's just called bone, has got a little bit of influence over that mesh, but not a lot. So we can click on the vertices, and you can add influence or take influence away, depending on how the settings on the brush are set. Whether it's, adding a value 1 or value 0 up in the weight control. So let's go to pose mode now and we'll see what that's done. So back to object mode, just select the armature. Let's go to pose mode. So let's try rotating this bone. So rotate, yep, that looks good. Try rotating this one, rotate. Okay, that's not so good, because when we move bone 01, we don't really want the mesh that's associated with the other bone to move. So what we can do is we can go back into weight painting mode. So let's go to object mode. So make sure the armature is selected. Select that other mesh here. So we want to take away some influence. So if we go into weight paint, okay, so that's good. We've got bone 01 selected, but we've also got this mesh selected, and you can see that bone 01 is influencing that mesh, which we really don't want. So what we can do is we can set our weight painting value to 0. We can just click on the vertices. So we want this to go nice and blue all over, which will show us or signify that that bone 01 has then got no influence over that mesh. So let's go back to object mode. Let's go back to pose mode. Let's see what happens now. So now let's try rotating that bone. So rotate. Yeah, that looks good. Let's try rotating this bone. Rotate. That looks good. So we can see now that it's working as we would expect it to work. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I really need to show you. So yeah, so what we've got is we've got an armature. Go back to object mode. Rather, let's go to pose mode. So our armature, let's go to the that section. Yeah, you'll notice that the armature is set to deform, so deform the mesh. We should be able to see on that one, for example, that as far as the armature is concerned, bone isn't parented to anything. Bone 01 is parented to bone, which is why when we move this bone, bone 01 rotates. You'll notice that when we go back to object mode on the mesh, we go to the modifier stack. You can see that each mesh has got a modifier, an armature modifier. If we go into, what else can we see? We're looking at edit mode. I did want to talk about vertex groups a little bit more. Let's do that. You can see that this mesh in edit mode has actually got 2 vertex groups in it. It's actually although it shouldn't necessarily need two. It really only needs one. We could get rid of Bono 1. Don't need it. What about this one? Okay, so that's got two vertex groups, which is interesting. See if we've broken anything by doing that. Go back to pose mode. Don't think it should have done. Oh, Alt R will reset the rotation. Yeah, we're still good. Don't know why that bone's got two sets of vertex groups. Sorry, why that mesh has got two sets of vertex groups. Might look at that. Let's go into edit mode. So let's try deselecting. Okay, so that has got an influence. What about this one? Oh, okay. So we've got two vertex groups. We only need one. Yeah, right. Well, I'm hoping that you might find that useful. But what we're saying is to actually do rigging, you'll need a combination of an armature, your mesh that is parented to that armature, and that mesh will also then have one or more vertex groups that the bone in the armature deforms when it moves to affect the shape of the mesh. I hope you understood that. My advice would be have a play with just a very simple setup like we've got here. Find out what happens when you delete a vertex group, for example, once you've done some weight painting, and then re-add it. How does that affect it? Why does it not work if you rotate it, if you do that? Have a play, and that will hopefully give you the knowledge and skill that you need to start understanding how weight painting, how rigging, how it all works, why it works, and it'll help you troubleshoot what to look for when something isn't working as you would expect it to. Anyway, so yeah, that was Rigging 101. So thanks for watching. Keep your eye on the channel. Like and subscribe. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.